The first shot rang out as Vivian Zimmer leapt from the train just outside of Leadville, Colorado. The year was 1879, and she had nothing but the clothes on her back, a small valise clutched tightly against her chest, and a past that threatened to swallow her whole. Her auburn hair, once pinned neatly beneath an expensive hat, now whipped wildly around her face as she tumbled down the embankment, rocks and twigs tearing at her once fine traveling dress. "Stop that woman!" The conductor's voice carried on the wind, but Vivian didn't slow her pace. Her lungs burned as the thin mountain air filled them, the elevation of Leadville over 10,000 feet making her dizzy as she ran. Behind her, the train whistle blew angrily, but the locomotive continued on its journey, unable to halt for one desperate woman who couldn't pay her fare. Vivian ran until the sound of the train faded, until her legs could no longer carry her. She collapsed beside a stream, her chest heaving, tears streaming down her dirt-smudged face. 4 days ago, she had been Mrs. Vivian Harrington, wife of the most respected banker in St. Louis. Now, she was a fugitive, running from scandal and shame, from whispers and pointed fingers. Running from the knowledge that her husband had taken his own life after his financial crimes were exposed, leaving her to face the consequences alone. "You picked a poor place to rest, madam." The deep voice startled her, and Vivian scrambled to her feet, nearly losing her balance. A man sat atop a chestnut horse, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. He wasn't wearing a badge, but that didn't mean he wasn't trouble. "I am just passing through," she stammered, backing away slowly, calculating whether she could outrun a horse in her current state. The answer was decidedly no. The stranger dismounted with a fluid grace that spoke of years in the saddle. As he stepped closer, Vivian could see he was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 30 or so, with a strong jawline covered in several days' worth of stubble. His eyes, a startling shade of green, assessed her carefully. "Passing through to where, exactly?" he asked, gesturing at the wilderness surrounding them. "Nearest town is Leadville, and that's 5 miles back the way you came. Next town is 40 miles west, over mountain passes that would kill you without proper gear." He glanced at her torn dress and impractical shoes. "Which you clearly don't have." Vivian lifted her chin, summoning what little dignity she had left. "My arrangements are none of your concern, sir." The man's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Name's Griff Xavier, madam. Most folks call me Griff." He touched the brim of his hat. "And out here, surviving is everyone's concern." "I didn't ask for your help," Vivian said, though her voice lacked conviction. She was exhausted, hungry, and completely out of her element. "No, but you need it all the same." Griff's eyes softened slightly. "Look, I've got a ranch about 2 hours' ride from here. I can offer you a meal, a place to clean up, maybe some clothes that aren't torn to pieces. After that, you can be on your way." Vivian hesitated. Every instinct told her not to trust this stranger, but what choice did she have? Night was falling, temperatures would drop dramatically, and she had no shelter, no food, and no real plan. "Why would you help me?" she asked suspiciously. Griff shrugged. "My mother raised me to be a gentleman. Can't very well leave a lady alone in these parts." He gestured to his horse. "You got a name, Vivian," she said after a moment, deliberately omitting her surname. "Just Vivian." "Well, just Vivian," Griff said with a hint of amusement. "I'm guessing you've got a story, and it's probably not a happy one. But out here, what matters is what you do next, not what you did before." He extended his hand. "Your future starts with me, at least for tonight." Vivian stared at his outstretched hand. In that moment, she made a decision that would alter the course of her life forever. She reached out and allowed this stranger to pull her up onto his horse. The ride to Griff's ranch was mostly silent. Vivian sat behind him, her hands reluctantly circling his waist for balance. She tried to ignore how solid he felt, how the scent of leather and pine surrounded him. Instead, she focused on the landscape, the towering pines, the distant peaks of the Rocky Mountains still capped with snow even in June, the occasional flash of wildlife darting between trees. "You're not from around here," Griff said finally, breaking the silence. It wasn't a question. "No," Vivian agreed. "I'm from St. Louis." She immediately regretted giving away even that small detail. Long way from home. "Home isn't there anymore," she murmured, more to herself than to him. Griff didn't press further, and Vivian was grateful. As they crested a hill, a valley opened up below them, and Vivian caught her first glimpse of Griff's ranch. It wasn't grand by St. Louis standards, but it was impressive nonetheless, a sturdy two-story house with a wide porch, several outbuildings, and grazing land stretching as far as she could see. Cattle dotted the landscape, and a small creek wound through the property. "Xavier Ranch," Griff announced with undisguised pride. "My father started with nothing but 20 acres and 5 head of cattle, built it into this. When he died 3 years ago, I took over." "It's beautiful," Vivian said sincerely. As they approached the house, a dog bounded out to greet them, followed by an older woman wiping her hands on her apron. "Griffin Xavier, where have you been? Dinner's been ready for an hour." The woman's scolding tone shifted to surprise when she noticed Vivian. "And who might this be?" "Mrs. Holloway, this is Vivian. She'll be staying with us tonight," Griff said, dismounting and then helping Vivian down. "Vivian, this is Mrs. Holloway, my housekeeper and the closest thing to a mother I've had since mine passed 15 years ago." Mrs. Holloway's shrewd eyes took in Vivian's disheveled appearance, the dirt on her face, and the tears in her once fine dress. To Vivian's surprise, the woman's face softened. "Well then, let's get you inside. You look like you could use a hot bath and a decent meal." She turned to Griff. "You can tend to Hector. I'll take care of our guest." Griff nodded, leading his horse toward the stables, and Vivian found herself being ushered into the house by Mrs. Holloway's firm but gentle hand on her back. The interior of the ranch house was unexpectedly refined. Polished wooden floors, comfortable furniture, and tasteful decorations spoke of care and attention to detail that Vivian hadn't expected in a frontier home. "The master's mother had fine taste," Mrs. Holloway explained, noticing Vivian's surprised expression. "Brought most of this furniture all the way from Boston when she married Mr. Xavier S.R. Now, let's draw you a bath. You can use the guest room upstairs." An hour later, Vivian descended the stairs feeling more human than she had in days. She'd bathed, washed her hair, and donned a simple but clean dress that Mrs. Holloway had found for her. It was a bit large, but the housekeeper had cinched it with a belt to make it presentable. Griff was waiting in the dining room, freshly washed as well, his dark hair still damp. He stood when she entered, and Vivian was struck by how different he looked without his hat and trail dust. Handsome, her mind supplied unhelpfully. "You clean up nice," he said with a hint of a smile. "Thank you for your hospitality," Vivian replied formally, taking the seat he pulled out for her. "And for the clothes. Those belong to my sister, Beth. She lives in Denver now with her husband and children, but she keeps some things here for when she visits." Griff sat across from her as Mrs. Holloway began serving a hearty meal of beef stew, fresh bread, and vegetables from the kitchen garden. Vivian ate slowly, savoring each bite. It had been days since she'd had a proper meal, subsisting on whatever meager provisions she could afford after selling her wedding ring in Kansas City. "So, Vivian," Griff said after they'd eaten in silence for a while, "what brings a St. Louis lady to the Colorado wilderness alone?" Vivian set down her fork. "I'd rather not discuss it." "Fair enough," Griff conceded. But if you're running from something or someone, it might help to know what I'm potentially getting involved in by helping you." "You're not getting involved in anything," Vivian said sharply. "I'll be gone tomorrow." "Gone to where?" Griff challenged. "You have no money, don't look surprised. It's obvious from your situation, no connections here, and from what I can tell, no plan." "I have a plan," Vivian insisted, though they both knew it was a lie. "Enlighten me." Vivian glared at him, but his steady gaze didn't waver. Finally, she sighed. "I was hoping to find work in Leadville. I've heard the silver boom has created opportunities." "What kind of work?" "I can keep books," Vivian said. "My father was an accountant. He taught me." Griff raised an eyebrow. "That's an unusual skill for a woman." "My father had no sons," Vivian explained. "He always said, 'Why waste a perfectly good mind just because it belongs to a girl?' Smart man, your father." Griff took a sip of his coffee. "But Leadville's rough, especially for a woman alone. The silver mines bring in all sorts. Not all of them gentlemen." "I can take care of myself," Vivian insisted. "Like you were doing when I found you." Griff's voice wasn't unkind, but his words stung nonetheless. Vivian pushed back her chair and stood. "Thank you for dinner, Mr. Xavier. If you'll excuse me, I'm quite tired." Griff stood as well. "I didn't mean to offend you." "You didn't," Vivian lied. "Good night." She hurried up the stairs to the guest room, closing the door firmly behind her. Leaning against it, she took a deep breath, fighting back tears. Griff was right, of course. She had no real plan, no resources, no way forward. But admitting that felt too much like admitting defeat. Vivian moved to the window, looking out at the mountains silhouetted against the night sky. The moon cast silver light across the valley, illuminating the ranch below. It was peaceful here, far removed from the scandal and shame that had driven her from St. Louis. A knock on the door startled her. "Vivian," Griff's voice was low. "I'm sorry if I upset you. That wasn't my intention." Vivian hesitated, then opened the door. Griff stood in the hallway, his expression contrite. "You were right," she admitted quietly. "I don't have a plan, I just needed to get away." Griff nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I have a proposition for you." Vivian stiffened, immediately suspicious. Reading her expression, Griff quickly added, "A business proposition. Mrs. Holloway has been handling the ranch accounts, but her eyesight isn't what it used to be. If you can truly keep books, I could use the help. Room and board plus a modest salary." Vivian blinked in surprise. "You'd trust a complete stranger with your finances." "I'm a decent judge of character," Griff said with a shrug. "Besides, Mrs. Holloway would be checking your work until I'm sure you know what you're doing. And when I've proven myself, then you'll have references for a position in town if that's still what you want." Griff met her eyes. "Think about it overnight. Let me know in the morning." With that, he turned and headed back downstairs, leaving Vivian staring after him, confusion and a flicker of hope warring within her. Sleep came fitfully that night. Vivian's dreams were haunted by the past, her husband's betrayal, the public disgrace, the whispers and accusations. She woke just after dawn, the decision already made in her heart. She found Griff in the kitchen, drinking coffee while reviewing some papers. He looked up when she entered, his green eyes questioning. "I'll take the position," Vivian said without preamble, "but I want to be clear this is temporary, until I can establish myself elsewhere." Griff nodded, the hint of a smile playing at his lips. "Of course. Shall we say 3 months? That should give you time to save some money and make connections in town." 3 months, Vivian agreed, extending her hand to seal the deal. Griff took it, his grip firm but gentle. "Welcome to Xavier Ranch, Miss Vivian." "It's Mrs. actually," Vivian corrected before she could stop herself. Something flickered in Griff's eyes, surprise perhaps, or disappointment. "Ah, your husband is dead," Vivian said flatly, withdrawing her hand. It wasn't exactly a lie. Charles had been declared dead after they found his hat floating in the Mississippi River, though his body had never been recovered. Most believed he'd taken his own life rather than face prison for embezzling from his own bank. Vivian wasn't so sure. Charles had always been a coward, but he was also resourceful. Part of her wondered if he was alive somewhere, starting over with the money she'd known nothing about. "I'm sorry," Griff said, and he seemed to mean it. "Don't be," Vivian replied, more harshly than she'd intended. Softening her tone, she added, "It was some time ago." Griff nodded, accepting her explanation without further questions. "Mrs. Holloway will show you the account books after breakfast. I have to ride out to check on the herd today, but I'll be back by supper." And just like that, Vivian found herself integrated into life at Xavier Ranch. The days fell into a rhythm. Mornings were spent reviewing the ranch's accounts, updating ledgers, and organizing receipts. Afternoons, Vivian often helped Mrs. Holloway with household tasks or took walks around the property, gradually building her strength and becoming accustomed to the altitude. Evenings were spent in the comfortable parlor, where Griff would sometimes read aloud from one of the many books that lined the shelves, or they would simply talk about the day's events. Vivian learned that Griff had attended university in Denver before returning to take over the ranch when his father fell ill. He was intelligent and well-read, with opinions on everything from politics to literature. He was kind to his workers, fair in his business dealings, and possessed a dry wit that often caught Vivian by surprise, making her laugh when she least expected it. For his part, Griff seemed genuinely interested in Vivian's thoughts and ideas. He listened when she spoke, considered her suggestions about the ranch's finances, and never made her feel less than his equal, something Charles had never done, despite their shared social standing. As June gave way to July, Vivian found herself settling into life at the ranch, almost forgetting that her stay was meant to be temporary. Almost, but not quite. The specter of her past still haunted her, especially at night when the house grew quiet and her thoughts had nowhere else to go. On the first Saturday in July, Griff announced at breakfast that they would be going into Leadville. "The town's having a celebration for Independence Day," he explained. "Parade, picnic, dancing in the evening. Thought you might enjoy the change of scenery." Vivian hesitated. She'd been avoiding town, afraid that someone might recognize her, though rationally she knew it was unlikely anyone in Leadville would know of the scandal in St. Louis. "You don't have to if you don't want to," Griff added, noting her hesitation. "No, I'd like to go," Vivian decided. It would be nice to see more than just the ranch. Mrs. Holloway insisted that Vivian wear one of Beth's nicer dresses for the occasion. "Can't have you going to town looking like a ranch hand," she said, pulling out a pretty blue cotton dress with white trim. "This should fit you well enough." The dress did fit, surprisingly well, and when Vivian descended the stairs, she was rewarded with a look of appreciation from Griff that made her cheeks warm. "You look lovely," he said simply, offering his arm to escort her to the wagon. The ride into Leadville took just over an hour. As they approached, Vivian was struck by the bustling activity of the town. Despite its remote location, Leadville was thriving, the silver mines having transformed what had once been a small settlement into a proper city with brick buildings, boardwalks, and all the amenities of civilization. "It's larger than I expected," Vivian commented as they drove down Harrison Avenue, the main thoroughfare. "Second largest city in Colorado after Denver," Griff informed her. "The silver rush did what the gold rush couldn't. Over 30,000 people now and growing every day." They parked the wagon near the courthouse and joined the crowds gathering for the parade. Griff seemed to know everyone, stopping frequently to introduce Vivian to neighbors, business associates, and friends. She smiled and made polite conversation, trying to ignore the curious glances and occasional whispers that followed these introductions. A woman living at a bachelor's ranch, even with a housekeeper present, was bound to raise eyebrows. The parade was a colorful affair, with decorated wagons, cavalry soldiers, marching bands, and local dignitaries. Children darted through the crowds, waving small flags and shouting with excitement. For a few hours, Vivian allowed herself to enjoy the festivities without worry, caught up in the patriotic fervor and sense of community. After the parade, they joined the town picnic in the park. Griff spread a blanket on the grass, and Mrs. Holloway's fried chicken and apple pie were a welcome addition to the shared feast. Vivian was just reaching for a second piece of pie when a shadow fell across the blanket. "Well, if it isn't Griff Xavier," a female voice said. "I was beginning to think you were avoiding town on purpose." Vivian looked up to see a striking blonde woman in an expensive-looking dress, her hair arranged in an elaborate style that seemed out of place for a town picnic. Griff stood, his expression carefully neutral. "Gloria, nice to see you. And who is this?" Gloria asked, her blue eyes assessing Vivian with undisguised curiosity. "Vivian, this is Gloria Thornton. Her father owns the Silver Queen mine. Gloria, this is Vivian, my new bookkeeper." "Bookkeeper?" Gloria's perfectly arched eyebrows rose in surprise. "How unusual. Mrs. Zimmer is exceptionally qualified," Griff said, a slight edge to his voice. "I'm sure she is," Gloria replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, I won't intrude on your professional outing, but do save me a dance tonight, Griffin, for old time's sake." With a swish of expensive fabric, Gloria sauntered away, leaving an awkward silence in her wake. "An old friend?" Vivian asked, trying to keep her tone light. "Something like that," Griff muttered, sitting back down. "Gloria's father wanted an alliance between our families. I wanted something else." "I see." Vivian didn't know why this information bothered her, but it did. The afternoon continued pleasantly enough, but Vivian couldn't help noticing how Griff's mood had shifted after Gloria's appearance. He was quieter, less animated, and his gaze occasionally drifted to where Gloria held court among a group of well-dressed townspeople. As evening approached, the town square was transformed for dancing. Lanterns were strung between buildings. A wooden platform served as a dance floor, and a small band struck up a lively tune. Couples began to gather, women in their finest dresses, men in clean shirts and polished boots. "Would you care to dance?" Griff asked, extending his hand to Vivian. "I'm not sure that's wise," Vivian hesitated, glancing around at the curious onlookers. "People are already talking." "Let them talk," Griff said with a shrug. "Unless you don't want to dance with me." There was something in his eyes, a vulnerability that tugged at Vivian's heart. "No, it's not that. I just one dance," Griff insisted. "Then we can go home if you wish." Vivian placed her hand in his, allowing him to lead her onto the dance floor. The band was playing a waltz, and Griff proved to be an excellent dancer, guiding her smoothly through the steps. His hand at her waist was warm and steady, and despite herself, Vivian found she was enjoying the closeness. "Where did you learn to dance like this?" she asked, trying to distract herself from the way her heart had begun to race. "My mother insisted. Said no son of hers would stumble around a dance floor like a newborn colt." Griff smiled at the memory. "She hired a dance instructor from Denver to come to the ranch once a week. My sister and I both had lessons. She sounds like a formidable woman." "She was." A shadow crossed Griff's face. "She died when I was 15, influenza." "I'm sorry," Vivian said softly. "I lost my parents too. Father when I was 16, mother 2 years later. It's a hard thing, losing family, Griff acknowledged. Makes you appreciate the ones you have left all the more. The music shifted to a more upbeat tune, and Griff spun Vivian in a circle, making her laugh despite herself. For a few blissful moments, she forgot about Charles, about the scandal, about everything except the man whose arms held her securely as they moved across the dance floor. The moment was shattered by Gloria's reappearance. "I believe you promised me a dance, Griffin," she said, stepping between them with practiced grace. "You wouldn't want to disappoint me, would you?" Griff glanced at Vivian apologetically. "Would you excuse me for one dance?" "Of course," Vivian said, stepping back. "I should check on the wagon anyway." She walked away quickly, not wanting to watch Griff dance with the beautiful Gloria. It was ridiculous to feel jealous, she told herself. She had no claim on Griff, no right to care who he danced with. In less than 2 months, she would be leaving the ranch anyway. The thought brought an unexpected pang of sadness. Vivian made her way through the crowded square toward where they had left the wagon. The streets were darker here, away from the festive lanterns, and she walked carefully, mindful of her footing. "Well, well, what have we here?" The slurred voice came from the shadows between 2 buildings. Vivian quickened her pace, but a man stepped into her path, blocking her way. He was large, unshaven, and clearly drunk, swaying slightly as he leered at her. "Excuse me," Vivian said firmly, trying to step around him. "Not so fast, pretty lady." The man moved with her, cutting off her escape. "What's your hurry? Night's just getting started." "I need to return to my companions," Vivian said, her heart pounding. "They're expecting me." "Don't see nobody looking for you," the man said, glancing around theatrically. "Seems to me you're all alone." He reached for her arm, and Vivian stepped back, only to find herself against the wall of a building. The man moved closer, his breath reeking of whiskey. "Please let me pass," Vivian said, her voice steadier than she felt. "After we get acquainted," the man insisted, his hand coming up to touch her face. "The lady asked you to let her pass." Griff's voice, cold and hard, cut through the darkness. He stood a few feet away, his posture deceptively relaxed, but Vivian could see the tension in his shoulders, the dangerous glint in his eyes. The drunk turned, sizing up Griff with bleary eyes. "This ain't none of your business, mister. That's where you're wrong." Griff took a step forward. "The lady is with me, which makes it very much my business." The man seemed to reconsider, noting Griff's height and the set of his jaw. "Didn't realize she was spoken for," he mumbled, backing away. "Now you do," Griff said evenly. "I suggest you find somewhere else to be." The drunk shuffled off, muttering under his breath. As soon as he was out of sight, Griff was at Vivian's side, his hands gentle as they checked her for injuries. "Are you all right? Did he hurt you?" "I'm fine," Vivian assured him, though she couldn't quite control the trembling of her hands. "He just frightened me." Griff's expression was grim. "I shouldn't have left you alone, I'm sorry." "It's not your fault," Vivian said. "I shouldn't have wandered off." "Let's go home," Griff decided, offering her his arm. "I think we've had enough excitement for one day." The ride back to the ranch was quiet, both lost in their own thoughts. Vivian couldn't help replaying the incident in her mind, wondering what might have happened if Griff hadn't appeared when he did. And yet, beneath the fear and gratitude, another emotion lingered, a warm flutter in her chest whenever she recalled Griff's protective stance, his unflinching claim. "The lady is with me." It was dangerous, this feeling. Dangerous because in less than 2 months she would leave Xavier Ranch behind. Dangerous because even if she stayed, she carried secrets that would destroy any chance of happiness. Dangerous because Griff deserved someone whole, someone without a past shadowed by scandal and shame. Someone like Gloria Thornton, perhaps. The thought was like a cold splash of water, dousing the warm glow that had been building within her. Vivian straightened her shoulders, reminding herself that her time at the ranch was a temporary respite, nothing more. She couldn't afford to forget that, no matter how tempting it might be. As July progressed, the ranch grew busier. The summer cattle drive was approaching, and preparations consumed much of Griff's time. Vivian threw herself into her work, organizing the accounts with meticulous care, determined to leave everything in perfect order when she eventually departed. One evening, as thunderclouds gathered on the horizon, promising a much-needed rain, Vivian sat on the porch, watching the distant lightning illuminate the mountains. Griff joined her, offering a cup of coffee, which she accepted gratefully. "Storm's coming," he observed, settling into the chair beside hers. "Good thing, too, we need the rain." Vivian nodded, sipping her coffee. "Will it affect the cattle drive?" "Shouldn't. We're not heading out until next week." Griff stretched his long legs out in front of him. "Though I admit I'm not looking forward to 2 weeks on the trail. The older I get, the less appealing sleeping on the ground becomes." Vivian smiled. "You're hardly ancient, Mr. Xavier. Some days I feel it." Griff's expression grew serious. "Vivian, there's something I need to ask you." Her heart skipped a beat. "Yes, while I'm gone, would you consider staying on at the ranch? Mrs. Holloway will be here, of course, but I'd feel better knowing you were handling things in my absence." Vivian hesitated. "I'm not sure I'm qualified to run a ranch." "You wouldn't be running it, just keeping an eye on things. Miguel, my foreman, will handle the daily operations. But having you here, someone I trust with the business side." Griff trailed off, looking slightly embarrassed. "I'd consider it a personal favor. You trust me that much?" Vivian asked softly. "I do." Griff's gaze was steady. "More than I probably should, given how little I know about you." The words hung between them, an implicit question that Vivian wasn't ready to answer. "I'll stay," she said finally, "until you return." Griff's smile was worth the compromise. "Thank you." The storm broke then, rain pelting down in heavy sheets. They retreated inside, and the conversation shifted to safer topics: the cattle prices in Denver, the new schoolteacher in Leadville, the book Griff was currently reading. But Vivian couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them, some invisible barrier weakening just slightly. Later that night, lying in bed listening to the rain on the roof, Vivian made a decision. When Griff returned from the cattle drive, she would tell him the truth about Charles, about the scandal, about why she had fled St. Louis. He deserved that much, at least, and if he asked her to leave afterward, well, that would only hasten the inevitable. The morning of the cattle drive dawned clear and cool. The ranch was a flurry of activity as the cowboys made final preparations, checking gear, saddling horses, and rounding up the herd. Vivian watched from the porch, a strange heaviness in her chest at the thought of Griff's departure. He found her there as the sun climbed higher, looking capable and confident in his trail clothes, his hat pulled low over his eyes. "We'll be heading out soon," he said, leaning against the porch rail. "Remember what I told you about the Jacobson contract? Don't let him try to change the terms while I'm gone." "I remember," Vivian assured him. "Don't worry, Mr. Xavier. Your ranch is in good hands. I know it is." Griff straightened, adjusting his hat. "And I think after all this time you could call me Griff." Vivian smiled. "Safe travels." "Griff." He nodded, seeming about to say something more, then thought better of it. With a tip of his hat, he turned and strode toward his waiting horse. Vivian watched as the cowboys moved the cattle out, a river of brown and white flowing across the valley, dust rising in their wake. Griff rode at the head, his straight-backed figure commanding even at a distance. The ranch felt strangely empty in the days that followed. Vivian kept busy, overseeing the remaining workers, meeting with suppliers, and continuing her meticulous organization of the accounts. Mrs. Holloway watched her with knowing eyes but said nothing about the way Vivian's gaze often drifted to the horizon, searching for signs of the returning herd. A week into Griff's absence, Vivian rode into Leadville to mail some correspondence and purchase supplies. The town was as busy as ever, silver miners coming and going, merchants hawking their wares, ladies shopping or visiting the tea room. Vivian had just finished her errands and was preparing to head back to the ranch when a familiar voice stopped her cold. "My dear Mrs. Harrington." What an unexpected pleasure. Vivian turned slowly, her blood running cold. Standing before her, impeccably dressed and wearing a satisfied smile, was Douglas Wainwright, her late husband's business partner and the man who had made it clear that he held her responsible for Charles's financial misdeeds. "Mr. Wainwright," Vivian acknowledged, struggling to keep her voice steady, "what brings you to Leadville? Business, my dear. The silver mines are quite the investment opportunity." His eyes narrowed. "Though I might ask you the same question. Last I heard, you had disappeared rather precipitously from St. Louis." "I needed a fresh start," Vivian said carefully. "Indeed." Wainwright glanced around the bustling street. "And have you found it here in this frontier town?" "I have." Vivian lifted her chin defiantly. "If you'll excuse me, I should be getting back." "Back to where, exactly?" Wainwright's voice had hardened. "People in St. Louis would be very interested to know where Charles Harrington's wife has settled, particularly those who lost their life savings in his schemes." "I knew nothing about Charles's activities," Vivian insisted, a familiar anger rising within her. "As was proven in the investigation." "Perhaps," Wainwright conceded, "but the court of public opinion is less forgiving than a court of law, and I wonder what your new friends here would think if they knew the truth about you." The threat was clear. Vivian felt sick, her carefully constructed new life threatening to crumble around her. "What do you want, Mr. Wainwright?" "Nothing at all, my dear." His smile was cold. "Consider this a friendly warning. Your past has a way of catching up with you. It would be a shame if your new acquaintances were to discover who you really are." With a tip of his hat, Wainwright strolled away, leaving Vivian shaken and afraid. She hurried to her wagon, desperate to return to the safety of the ranch, her mind racing with the implications of the encounter. Wainwright knew where she was now. It was only a matter of time before he made good on his threat. And when he did, when the people of Leadville learned about Charles's crimes and her connection to them, any chance of building a life here would be destroyed, including any chance with Griff. The realization was like a physical pain. Sometime during the past weeks, without even noticing it happening, Vivian had begun to care for the ranch owner. More than care, her feelings ran deeper, more dangerous. And now, just as she was acknowledging them to herself, everything was about to be ripped away. She had to leave. Tonight. Before Wainwright could spread his poison, before Griff returned to find his reputation tainted by association with her. It was the only way. Back at the ranch, Vivian moved with desperate efficiency, packing her few belongings into the valise she had arrived with. She wrote a brief note explaining that family matters had called her away unexpectedly, thanking Griff for his kindness and apologizing for leaving without proper notice. The lies tasted bitter, but they were kinder than the truth. She left the note on Griff's desk, weighted down with a small stone. Then, gathering her courage, she slipped out to the stables. She would borrow one of the horses, leaving enough money to more than compensate for its value. She could ride to the train station in the next town over, catch a train heading east or west, it hardly mattered where, as long as it was far from Leadville and far from Griff. The night was clear. Stars scattered across the velvet sky like diamonds on black satin. Vivian saddled a gentle mare named Daisy, whispering apologies as she led the horse from the stable. She was just about to mount when a voice stopped her. "Going somewhere?" Vivian whirled around to find Mrs. Holloway standing in the stable doorway, arms crossed over her chest, expression unreadable in the dim light. "I have to leave," Vivian said, unable to meet the older woman's eyes. "Please don't try to stop me." "I'm not here to stop you," Mrs. Holloway said, stepping closer. "I'm here to ask why a woman who's clearly in love with my employer is running away in the middle of the night." Vivian's breath caught. That's not, don't bother denying it," Mrs. Holloway cut her off. "I've seen the way you look at him when you think no one's watching. And I've seen how he looks at you, too." Tears threatened, and Vivian blinked them back furiously. "It doesn't matter. I can't stay. Because of whatever sent you running in the first place." When Vivian looked up in surprise, Mrs. Holloway snorted. "Child, I wasn't born yesterday. You showed up out of nowhere with good manners and education but no money and no family looking for you. Doesn't take a genius to figure out you're running from something." "Someone from my past is in Leadville," Vivian admitted. "He knows things about me. Things that would hurt Griff if they became public knowledge. And you think running away will protect him?" Mrs. Holloway asked skeptically. "Yes," Vivian insisted. "If I'm gone, there's no reason for anyone to connect Griff to my situation." Mrs. Holloway was quiet for a moment. "And what do you think will happen when Griff returns to find you gone? Do you think he'll just shrug and move on? The man I know will turn this territory upside down looking for you." The thought hadn't occurred to Vivian. "He wouldn't. It's not like that between us. Isn't it, Mrs.?" Holloway's voice softened. "I've known Griff Xavier since he was in short pants. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Not even that Thornton girl, and half the county thought they'd marry." Vivian's heart constricted painfully. "That's why I have to go. Griff deserves someone like Gloria, someone without secrets, without shame." "Seems to me that's his decision to make," Mrs. Holloway said firmly. "Not yours." "You don't understand, then help me understand," the older woman challenged. "What could possibly be so terrible that you'd rather run away than face it together?" The dam broke. Words poured out of Vivian about Charles, his embezzlement, his supposed suicide, the scandal, the whispers, the accusing looks. About Wainwright's threats and the certainty that he would make good on them. When she finished, Mrs. Holloway was silent for a long moment. Finally, she said, "So your husband stole money, possibly faked his death, and left you to face the consequences?" "Yes." "And because of his actions, you believe you deserve to be unhappy for the rest of your life?" Put that way, it sounded absurd. "It's not that simple." "It never is," Mrs. Holloway agreed, "but running away rarely solves anything. Trust me on that." There was a weight to her words, a hint of personal experience that made Vivian pause. "What would you have me do? Stay? Tell Griff the truth when he returns? Give him the chance to decide for himself if your past matters to him?" "And if it does," Vivian whispered, voicing her deepest fear. "If he asks me to leave?" "Then you'll leave knowing you were honest," Mrs. Holloway said simply. "But I don't think it will come to that." Vivian looked at the saddle horse, at her packed valise, at the open road that led away from Xavier Ranch. Then she looked back at Mrs. Holloway, whose wise eyes held no judgment, only understanding. "I'll stay," she decided. "At least until Griff returns." Mrs. Holloway nodded, satisfied. "Good. Now let's get this horse back in her stall before Miguel notices she's missing and raises the alarm." Together, they unsaddled Daisy and returned her to the stable. As they walked back to the house, Vivian retrieved her note from Griff's desk, tearing it into tiny pieces that fluttered from her fingers like confetti. The days passed slowly as Vivian waited for the cattle drive to return. Every morning, she scanned the horizon, hoping to see the dust cloud that would signal their approach. Every evening she sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple, practicing what she would say to Griff when he finally stood before her. The cattle drive had been successful, Miguel informed her after receiving a message from a rider. They would be home in 2 days' time, having sold the cattle at a good price in Denver. 2 days. 48 hours in which to find her courage. 48 hours to prepare for the possibility that once Griff knew the truth, she would no longer be welcome at Xavier Ranch. On the morning of Griff's expected return, Vivian dressed with extra care, choosing a pretty green dress that Mrs. Holloway insisted brought out the color of her eyes. She supervised the preparation of a special welcome home dinner, making sure all of Griff's favorites were included. And then she waited, alternating between hope and dread with each passing hour. It was mid-afternoon when the first riders appeared on the horizon. Vivian watched from the porch as the cowboys approached, tired but triumphant after their long journey. She searched the group for Griff, her heart skipping when she spotted him at the rear, his familiar broad-shouldered silhouette unmistakable even at a distance. As the men dismounted in the yard, calling greetings and heading for the bunkhouse, Griff handed his horse to a stable boy and strode toward the main house. He looked tired, his face tanned and weathered from 2 weeks on the trail, a layer of dust covering his clothes. But when he saw Vivian waiting on the porch, his smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "You're still here," he said, climbing the steps to stand before her. "Did you think I wouldn't be?" Vivian asked, suddenly shy under his intense gaze. "I wasn't sure," Griff admitted. 2 weeks is a long time. Things change. "Some things don't," Vivian said softly. Then, gathering her courage, she added, "Griff, there's something I need to tell you, something important." Concern flickered across his face. "Is everything all right?" The ranch is fine," Vivian assured him quickly. "This is personal about me, about my past." Griff's expression softened. "I see. Would you like to talk now or—" "After dinner, perhaps," Vivian suggested. "You should rest, clean up. It's been a long journey." "Dinner sounds good," Griff agreed, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "And Vivian, whatever it is, it'll be all right." His confidence both warmed and frightened her. If only he knew what she was about to tell him, he wouldn't be so certain. Dinner was a joyous affair, with Griff regaling them with stories from the cattle drive, the skittish steer that nearly stampeded the herd, the unexpected rainstorm that turned their camp into a muddy mess, the successful negotiation with the Denver buyer that resulted in a premium price for Xavier beef. Vivian laughed at the right moments, asked appropriate questions, but inside, her anxiety was building. Would this be her last meal at this table? Her last evening in this house that had come to feel like home after dinner, when Mrs. Holloway had cleared the dishes and retired to her room with a knowing glance at Vivian, Griff suggested they move to the parlor. He poured 2 small glasses of brandy, handing one to Vivian before settling into the armchair across from her. "Now," he said gently, "what is it you wanted to tell me?" Vivian took a deep breath. "My full name is Vivian Harrington, or it was before I came here. My husband was Charles Harrington, a banker in St. Louis." Griff's expression remained neutral. "Was? He's dead. At least, that's what everyone believes." Vivian stared into her brandy glass, gathering courage. Charles was found to have embezzled nearly $500,000 from his own bank. When the authorities came to arrest him, he disappeared. They found his hat floating in the Mississippi River. His body was never recovered. "You think he faked his death?" Griff said, not a question. Vivian nodded. "Charles was many things, but brave wasn't one of them. It would be just like him to run rather than face the consequences." "And where does that leave you? Disgraced, homeless. The bank seized our house, our assets." I was investigated, of course, but they found no evidence that I knew about or participated in Charles's schemes. Vivian's voice hardened. Because I didn't. I trusted my husband, I believed in him, and he betrayed that trust in the worst possible way. So you ran, Griff concluded. Yes. Vivian finally looked up, meeting his eyes. Even though I was legally cleared, socially I was ruined. People whispered, pointed, assumed I must have known. Former friends crossed the street to avoid me. I couldn't find work. No one would hire the wife of Charles Harrington, the man who had stolen their neighbor's life savings. That's why you were on that train, Griff said, understanding dawning. Why you jumped off. I couldn't afford the fare all the way to California, Vivian admitted. I paid as far as I could, hoping. I don't know what I was hoping. That they wouldn't check tickets, perhaps. It was foolish. It was desperate, Griff corrected. There's a difference. Vivian took a sip of brandy, letting the warm liquid fortify her. There's more. Last week, when I was in Leadville, I encountered Douglas Wainwright. He was Charles's business partner, though apparently not involved in the embezzlement. He recognized me, threatened to expose my identity to everyone in town. Griff's expression darkened. Did he harm you? No, nothing like that. But his threat was clear. He seemed to take pleasure in the idea of destroying what little peace I've found here. Vivian set down her glass. That's why I'm telling you this now. Because soon everyone will know, and your association with me will reflect poorly on you and the ranch. Is that what you think I care about? Griff asked, his voice low and intense. What people might say. You should care, Vivian insisted. Your reputation, your business, my reputation is solid enough to withstand a bit of gossip, Griff interrupted. And anyone who would pull their business over something so trivial isn't someone I want to deal with anyway. It's not trivial, Vivian argued. Charles stole people's savings, their futures, and rightly or wrongly some of that blame falls on me. Why? Because you were married to him, because you trusted him. Griff set his own glass aside with a decisive motion. Vivian, you're not responsible for Charles's actions. In the eyes of society, damn society, Griff said forcefully, startling her. I don't give a damn what society thinks in Leadville or anywhere else. I care what I think. And what I think is that you're the strongest, most capable woman I've ever met. Vivian stared at him, speechless. You lost everything, Griff continued, his voice softening. Your home, your reputation, your security. And instead of giving up, you picked yourself up and started over. Do you have any idea how much courage that takes? I was terrified, Vivian confessed. I still am. That's what makes it courage, Griff said simply. Doing what needs to be done despite the fear. He rose from his chair, crossing to kneel before her, taking her hands in his. Vivian, I don't care about your past. I care about you, the woman who organized my chaotic accounts, who makes misses. Holloway laugh, who watches sunsets from the porch with such wonder it's like you're seeing them for the first time. Tears welled in Vivian's eyes. Griff, let me finish, he said gently. I know you plan to leave after 3 months. That time is almost up, but I'm asking you to stay. Not as my bookkeeper, though heaven knows the ranch has never run more smoothly, but as more, Vivian whispered, hardly daring to hope. I love you, Vivian, Griff said, the words simple but profound. I think I've loved you since that first day when you stood by the stream, exhausted and afraid but still so fiercely determined. I want you to stay. I want to build a life with you, a future. A tear slipped down Vivian's cheek. What about Wainwright? The scandal? Let Wainwright talk. Let the whole territory gossip. It doesn't change how I feel. Griff reached up, gently brushing away her tear. Your past is part of you, but it doesn't define you. Your future starts with me if you'll have me. In that moment, the weight Vivian had carried for so long, the shame, the fear, the uncertainty began to lift. She looked into Griff's eyes and saw not judgment but acceptance, not pity but admiration, and something else, something warm and wonderful that made her heart soar. "I love you too," she whispered, the words feeling both foreign and perfectly right on her lips. "I've tried to keep my distance, knowing I would leave. But somewhere along the way, this place you became home." Griff's smile was radiant. "Then stay and be my wife. Face whatever comes, good or bad, together." "Yes," Vivian said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Yes, I'll stay. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes to all of it." Griff pulled her into his arms, his kiss gentle at first, then deepening as she responded. It was a promise, a beginning, a declaration. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Griff rested his forehead against hers. "We'll handle Wainwright," he assured her. "Together." Vivian nodded, believing him. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt hope, pure, uncomplicated hope for the future. They were married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony at the ranch. Mrs. Holloway wept openly, declaring it the happiest day of her life since my own wedding. God rest Howard's soul. Griff's sister Beth came from Denver with her family, embracing Vivian warmly and welcoming her to the family without reservation. The people of Leadville were more divided. Douglas Wainwright had indeed spread his poisonous tales, and some looked at Vivian with suspicion or outright hostility. But others, those who had come to know her during her months at the ranch, stood firmly by her side. And as weeks turned to months, as Vivian and Griff faced the whispers together with dignity and grace, the scandal gradually lost its power. Life at Xavier Ranch settled into a new rhythm. Vivian continued to manage the accounts, but now she also took on the role of the ranch mistress, hosting dinners for neighboring ranchers, organizing the annual harvest festival, and riding out with Griff to check on the herd or simply to enjoy the vast beauty of their land. Winter came, blanketing the valley in snow, turning the ranch into a peaceful haven. Vivian and Griff spent long evenings by the fire, planning improvements to the ranch, discussing books, dreaming of the future. And when spring arrived, bringing with it new calves and wildflowers dotting the meadows, it brought something else as well, the news that Vivian was expecting their first child. "A baby," Griff whispered, his hand gentle on Vivian's still flat stomach. "Our baby. Are you happy?" Vivian asked, though she could see the answer in his shining eyes. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Griff assured her, pulling her close. "You've given me everything, Vivian. Everything that matters." The baby, a boy they named James after Griff's father, was born on a crisp October day. He had his father's green eyes and his mother's determination, evident from his first angry cry. Holding him in her arms, Vivian marveled at the miracle of him, this perfect blend of her and Griff, this new life untouched by the shadows of the past. "He's beautiful," Griff murmured, perched on the edge of the bed, one finger captured in James's tiny fist, just like his mother. Vivian smiled, exhausted but radiant. "He has your eyes." "Poor child," Griff joked, but his voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you, Vivian, for him. For everything." As James grew, so did Xavier Ranch. Griff's innovative ranching methods and Vivian's careful financial management led to prosperity that allowed them to expand, purchasing neighboring land when it became available, modernizing their operations, and establishing Xavier beef as some of the finest in Colorado. Their family expanded as well. 2 years after James, a daughter joined the family, Elizabeth, named for Griff's sister. She had Vivian's auburn hair and quiet thoughtfulness, balanced by a streak of mischief that kept her parents constantly on their toes. Life wasn't without challenges. There were harsh winters that threatened the herd, economic downturns that strained their resources, and the occasional resurgence of whispers about Vivian's past. But through it all, they faced each obstacle together, their love and partnership only growing stronger with each test. 5 years after their marriage, as they sat on the porch watching James and Elizabeth playing in the yard, a rider approached. Griff tensed, recognizing the official uniform of a U.S. Marshal. The marshal dismounted, removing his hat as he approached. "Mr. and Mrs. Xavier, I'm Marshal Donovan." "What can we do for you, Marshal?" Griff asked, standing protectively. "I'm here about Charles Harrington," the marshal said, his gaze settling on Vivian. "He's been apprehended in San Francisco, alive and well, living under an assumed name." Vivian's heart seemed to stop. "Charles is alive." "You're certain?" "Yes, madam. Caught trying to run another banking scheme. He had most of the missing money still hidden in various accounts." The marshal hesitated. "Given your connection to the case, I thought you should hear it officially before the newspapers get hold of it." "Thank you," Griff said, his hand finding Vivian's shoulder. "We appreciate that." After the marshal left, Vivian sat in silence, processing the news. Charles was alive. All this time, he had been living his life, probably in luxury, while she had faced the consequences of his actions. "How do you feel?" Griff asked gently. Vivian considered the question carefully. "Vindicated, I suppose. I always believed he wasn't dead, and now everyone will know I was right." "Are you? Do you regret?" Griff couldn't seem to finish the question, but Vivian understood. "No," she said firmly, taking his hand. "I don't regret a single moment of our life together. Charles's actions led me here to you, to our children. I wouldn't change that for anything." Relief washed over Griff's face. "I just thought, now that he's been found, I can truly close that chapter of my life," Vivian interrupted. "I'm not Charles Harrington's abandoned wife anymore. I'm Vivian Xavier, and this is where I belong." Griff pulled her close, his arms strong and sure around her. "This is where you've always belonged." As the years passed, Xavier Ranch thrived, as did the family that called it home. James grew into a thoughtful young man who shared his father's love for the land and his mother's head for business. Elizabeth became a spirited young woman with a talent for horses and a determination to attend university in Denver, following in her uncle's footsteps. And Vivian and Griff, their love deepened by time and tested by challenges, remained the heart of it all, partners in every sense, building a legacy that had nothing to do with the past and everything to do with the future they had created together. On their 20th anniversary, as they stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in familiar hues of gold and purple, Griff wrapped his arms around Vivian from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Any regrets?" he murmured in her ear. Vivian turned in his embrace, looking up into the face she loved, older now, lined by sun and laughter, but still as handsome to her as it had been that day by the stream. "Not one," she said truthfully. "Every step, every choice led me here, to you, to this life. Even jumping from that train." Griff teased, "Especially that," Vivian laughed. "Best decision I ever made." "Second best," Griff corrected. "Best was saying yes when a dusty cowboy told you your future started with him." I don't recall it quite that way," Vivian said thoughtfully. "As I remember it, you found a desperate woman by a stream and offered her dinner." "Same difference," Griff insisted, pulling her closer. "I knew even then. Somehow I knew you were meant to be here." As the last rays of sunlight faded from the mountains, casting long shadows across the valley that was their home, Vivian stood in the circle of her husband's arms and felt the profound rightness of it all. The path that had brought her here had been difficult, filled with pain and loss and fear. But it had led to this moment, this life, this love, and she wouldn't change a single step.